Friends, about 2 months ago, something unusual happened, a confluence. In the course of about 3 weeks, 4 or really 5 different temple households came to me to set up a meeting and ask my opinion about independent living facilities in town. It's unusual that so many asked at the very same time, but it's not unusual, in fact, quite natural, that they would come and talk to me about this issue. After all, I've lived here in town for 6 years, and in that time I have visited all of them and know people at a dozen different facilities. And this is a big decision, knowing when and which one. And it's helpful to be connected to members, 100 members, living in different facilities all around town. That's a great resource that we have at Temple. But with so much interest, I decided to go ahead and set it to writing, take a stand, and formally write Rabbi Glickman's Guide to Independent Living Facilities. Wisdom, ratings, and practical tips. When is the right time to move? What are the best facilities in Sarasota? Should I stay in Sarasota or be closer to the kids? Right now, across this country, temple presidents, temple leaders are meeting with their rabbis and saying, Rabbi, what can we do to bring young people into the temple? And Rabbi Glickman's idea is, I know, why don't I give a sermon on senior living facilities? But here's the funny thing. Just this very week, 2 of our younger members went on tours of senior living facilities in Sarasota with their parents. It affects all of us. Someday, it's definitely going to affect all of us. Everyone is interested, I hope. Tonight, I'm not going to give my ratings, but instead focus on 3 topics that came out of this process that were especially interesting and human and meaningful, and take a moment to expand on a little more than I can put in the guide. We're going to address 3 questions tonight. Let's start with the first. When is the right time to move? And here, I would like to read an excerpt from the guide. The number 1 indicator is when you or a spouse lose your ease of mobility. If it becomes too hard to get in and out of a car, or if walking from the car to restaurants or friends' homes becomes a daunting task, it's time to move. Living at home can become isolating and lonely if you can't go out often. The lack of stimulation can lead to a decline in health and zest for life. Independent living facilities are like a cruise. There are activities every day and it all comes to you. Lectures, musical performances, card games, they're all in the building and easy to attend. Dinners in the dining room are a scene with friends to meet and lively chatter. You still have your own apartment and privacy and independence, but the chance to be with people is just so easy. Some people prefer to stay in their home for their garden, their memories, or their neighbors. But I have seen much better outcomes in general when people choose independent living. Often they experience a renaissance of energy and well-being. Most temple members who move into independent living say, quote, "We should have done this 3 years ago," end quote. So that comes from the guide directly. But tonight I want to share with you something that's not in the guide, and that is a real-life personal story of a longtime friend who has since passed on, named Sylvan Tanner. Sylvan moved to Kobernik at Aviva with his wife because of her. She had a condition that's not for me to say, but it not only greatly diminished her mobility, but also her cognitive ability. And it had grown quite hard to care for her at home, but also in caring for her, it had grown lonely and isolating for both of them. And Sylvan was the most charming extrovert, just a people person guy. And so when he came to Aviva, he just came alive. He continued to dote on his wife and wheeled her around everywhere. But now he had this life and exhilaration all around him to chat up people in the lobby. Every night at dinner, he didn't just go to his table. He made the rounds and said hi to everybody. It was everything he had hoped for. But it was also more. It was more than he expected. And here is one way. Sylvan loved baseball, and when he came down to Florida, he adopted the Rays and would watch the games religiously at home. It was his favorite thing. But when he got to Aviva, he found other people who wanted to watch the games. And so instead of spending, baseball games are like 14 hours. Instead of spending that time just sitting alone, he had this gang of about 6 of them. And they went to this big TV room with a big giant screen TV and the comfy chairs and whatever. And they all watched the game together. And it was so much more fun. And they had all their Rays paraphernalia. And they would talk about on the off days or in the off season and the trades and the this and the signings. And it became like this thing that just absolutely energized him that he never saw come. Question number 2 of 3. What are the best facilities in Sarasota? I'm not going to share that with you tonight. I brought 30 copies of the guide. You're going to have to come and check that out yourself. But I will share my methodology and the process. There are lots of places in Sarasota. In fact, they're opening up all the time. And right now, actually this week, we have a member who is making the plans to move into a brand new place that is opening up right near him and near his friends. And I went online and it looks beautiful. And I hope it's great, and it probably will be great. But with my guide, I'm looking at now and later. So now is the measure of independent living, the facility, the activities, the food, so forth. Later is about continuity of care. What happens down the road if you fall and break your hip and need rehab for 6 weeks? What happens if you get pneumonia? What happens in 10 years when your spouse grows frail and needs more services? If you go on a tour and talk to the salesperson, they will tell you what you provide. But experience will tell you if they really do. So for instance, the Glen Ridge in Palmer Ranch. It is one of 3 facilities that gets a top score in my guide. Currently, we have 4 women who live there, who have been there over 10 or in some cases over 15 years. All 4 of them started out in independent living, 3 of them with their husband, but all 4 of them have moved in time from independent living to assisted living, and when they needed more, they are now living in their sort of full service care wing, and all along the way they had various stints in the rehab wing in the facility, all at the Glen Ridge. And I will tell you, for all 4 of these women, for all 15 of these years, the Glen Ridge delivered. Every stage, every step, every time they had a problem that could have derailed, everything was seamless, cared for, proper. That is what you can get when you know people. We have 100 members who've been living in these facilities that I know and can tell you about their experience, not only right now, but for later. And now, not in the guide, I will tell you another example of personal experience. And here I'm going to share not just my experience, but actually a letter I wrote because I was so moved and appreciative of something that I'd seen at Aviva. By the way, Aviva is also one of the top 3 because it continues to deliver year after year, again after again, for a number of reasons. But I'm just going to share, I was so moved by an experience I had. I wrote a letter to the board of Aviva this was, I want to say 3 years ago. It was before the pandemic. Dear Board of Trustees of Aviva, I write to express my thanks to you for all your efforts on behalf of the community. I'm so grateful that we have Aviva here in Sarasota, and I don't take it for granted. Every Jewish community is obligated to provide housing for our seniors, and you fulfill this mitzvah on behalf of all of us. Last year, my dear friend, Rabbi Alan Schwartzman, was dying slowly, and he knew his fate. His greatest concern in life was caring for his beloved wife Elaine, who suffered from dementia. He had found a home for her in the memory unit at Anshin. He visited her every day and even moved to Kopernik to be closer to her. Anshin is the greater care wing building. Kopernik is the independent building. Days before he died, he told me that he could go in peace because he knew that she, his wife Elaine, would be well cared for. We both cried. Earlier this week, I made my rounds visiting my temple members who reside in Anshin. When I went to Elaine's room, it was empty. I went to the activity area where I've seen her before, taking part in dancing and singing. She was not there. I asked a staff member where she was, and I could not believe the answer. She was at the beach. The staff had taken her to the beach to see the water and feel the sand. I was so happy. I was happy for Elaine that she got to see the beach again. And I was happy for my friend Alan. He died trusting in Aviva, and his trust was well placed. That is why Aviva is one of 3 facilities in town to receive the highest rating. That and 100 other reasons. The last question. Should I stay in Sarasota or be closer to the kids? Here I'd like to read an excerpt again. This is a most challenging dilemma, and our members in the past have had mixed results in getting this decision right. If you have a child who wants you to live near them, that is a blessing that should not be taken for granted. If they are willing to be your everything and look after your medical care and finances and sit with you when you are hospitalized, you may owe it to them to be near them, even if it's not what you want. However, children up north often underestimate the depths of familiar bonds that we form with friends in Sarasota. Even in our old age, we have friends who count on us and depend on us, and we are useful here. There is dignity and purpose in life here that can be lost in a move up north. There is also winter to consider and the prospect of dreary months spent indoors. Of course, I want you to stay in town because I love you and will miss you. Some of our members have gone up north and found blessing in new stimulation in the delight of grandchildren nearby. Just as many have found lonely days and regret. This is the hardest decision. Friends, I want to tell you this section of the guide was the hardest to write. The members who've gotten this decision wrong haunt me. Some have stayed in town too long and should have gone north. And they got sick with chronic stuff, and their kids were constantly flying here and spending time here away from their own responsibilities, their kids, their jobs, and it wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't right. And we have other members who've gone north and just regretted it. They found no purpose to their life anymore. They were just waiting to die. And that is so sad. Look, it's not all gloom. Some of our members, kind of got it right. And, they went north and they found new friends or reconnected with old friends. And had like a new exhilaration being, with kids or being included in their kids' lives and their friends. And some of them chose to stay. I lost my place here, I'm sorry. But some friends, some people, chose to stay, and it worked out really well. Like their health was good, they had a fabulous life. And then, they got sick fast, and that was that. And it was the best decision ever, was to stay here. And everything worked out wonderfully for their whole lives. So it's not all gloom. But this is the hardest one. And I don't have the best answer other than to say you're not alone in this decision. Your rabbis are here to talk this over, and we can put you in touch with other members who've made these decisions and can give you real personal insight. Friends, in conclusion, I would like to draw our attention to our Torah portion this week. We're reading from the Torah portion of Bahar toward the very end of this book of Leviticus, and this week's Torah portion is all about the Jubilee year. The Jubilee year is one of the most bizarre and amazing and strange laws in all of the Torah, is that after 50 years, all land reverts back to its original owner. So the land was parceled up among all the clans, and people buy and sell properties, and some people amass a lot of property and so forth. But after 50 years, boom, it all goes right back to the original owners. And it's like a reset. This crazy system makes time not just like go right back and just sort of start over as if everything in the 50 years never happened, and you just go right back to the beginning. And this concept is in some ways a metaphor or an illustration of our lives, because this same kind of reset happens in the course of a natural human life. We will start off our life dependent. We are fed our food and driven around, and we long to, just live on our own and have our independence and our freedom. And then we get it, and it's great. And then someday, as we grow elderly, it reverts. And we start to lose our independence, and eventually we lose our car and have to be driven places, and people bring us food, and we lose our independence, and it's a hard pill to swallow. But what I want to say today, above all, is that it need not be morose. That with wisdom, by accepting new realities and embracing them, especially if you can, in advance and not constantly responding to crises, but if you can embrace these changes, you can find life within narrowing parameters. There are still yet mitzvot to do, and people to help, and life to live, even if that life gets smaller in scope. So if you choose right and live right, you can still enjoy each day and find your new life a blessing. Indeed, each new day a blessing. May it be so for each of us. And let us say, Amen.